Alright everyone, it's time for Vermont Issues, episode 27. Foliage is coming, which means lots and lots of tourists choking the roads, and lots of tourism dollars. Vermont has branded itself well as a place to watch leaves turn color. It'll only be a few weeks before that begins here in this state. You gotta realize our first expected frost date is in the middle of September, like we don't even really have a month to go. If we're lucky, we've had a few years where it drags on until the end of September, kind of early October, so that they've actually kind of changed the zone map here in this state because of global warming or something. And so things are a little bit warmer than they were maybe 10 years ago, but it's still, when people ask me, like in spring, when I do my garden updates around, mid-April through May, they're like, oh, it looks so barren, it's so dead, your dead garden. You gotta realize most plants here are annuals. They have to be resown every year. You've got perennials that'll come back. Even they don't really start sprouting up generally until May, other than some daffodils and hyacinths and a few. The crocuses are the first things that come out, so a lot of people plant them on little hillsides, and you get a dash of color while the grass is still brown. That's the reason why. It has nothing to do with bad gardening. It has to do with the fact that we're in northern New England. But people come to this state, and they watch the leaves turn color, and it's very charming, and they drink their mulled cider or whatever and sit in their cabin for a week, and they watch the leaves turn color. You do realize that foliage happens in all of the temperate parts of the United States, right? The fact is that our foliage is considered superior primarily because of the composition of our forests, not because, oh, it happens to be Vermont. You can see the same thing in New Hampshire and Maine, certainly. It would be similar, northern New York. You can see the same thing as far south as most of the mid-Atlantic. You get further south than that, and a lot of the time, it never gets cold enough for the trees to fully shed their leaves, and the species are different. So, you go down to, like, Georgia or something, plenty of parts of the state, they only get a few frosts. The number of sort of deciduous temperate zone trees that would change color is less. So you get some bare trees, but for the most part still kind of swampy and subtropical. You go down to Florida, it's always green. You go down to like southern Texas, it's kind of a desert, but you always have the palm trees and cacti. And very rarely you get a light frost. Like I think in like the valley down there from like McAllen to points east to South Padre, I think, hasn't it only snowed like once in the last 20, 30 years down there? It's not a common occurrence. Down south, unless you get to the higher elevations, you probably have, you've never seen what we would consider an actual snowstorm. You've seen maybe a dusting that lasted 10 minutes and burned off in the morning, and that's all you get. Here we get several feet of snow usually. We've had a couple of years lately where that hasn't been the case. I think it was 2011, we had a really, really wet, mild winter. And so we had snow, but it kept getting warm enough for a lot of it to melt. And so there was sort of this, like, maybe 4 or 5 inches of slushy, compacted stuff. Some of the grass never even browned. Some of it stayed green all through the winter, actually. I thought it was lovely. It's like, yeah, it's humid, and that's kind of chilly and miserable, still cloudy, but there was less snow. The temperatures were a good 15, 20 degrees higher than normal most days. I thought it was great. And then, of course, a couple years ago, I did a solstice garden update. We're getting towards the end of December, and there's still some greenery actually around. I hope we have another winter like that. I love, why do you think I'm not worried about climate change? Like up here, I love it. I think it'd be great if I could garden for an extra couple of weeks in the fall or something. But foliage is coming. There's no stopping it. It doesn't matter how much above normal the temperatures are. And there's reason to believe this will be another mild winter. Last winter was kind of close to average, before that warm. The one before that was bone-chilling. We had that polar vortex bullshit. It was a difficult issue. It's like November, you get an ice storm, knocks out the power for 3 days, I think. Back in 2015, I believe was the year, and then the year before that was none too warm either. We had a couple of really brutal winters in a row. I hope it's on the milder end. Which means foliage might be a few days late. I'm sorry for all you tourists that have already made your plans around the expected peak foliage date. But yeah, come watch the trees turn color. It's very wonderful. And hopefully we get, because it's been drier later on, like we had a really wet spring, we had a really wet early summer, then things started to dry out, which is great for the corn, by the way. Like the corn out there, I can't wait to do the next garden update. It's looking really good. What'll happen is that those trees will be nice and vibrant. If you get a lot of humid weather, humid and muggy and lots of rain, it sort of rots those leaves off, knocks them off the trees prematurely, and then you don't get a good foliage. And I've seen both. I've seen years where, because of the weather, the foliage is mostly just brown, mottled, rotting, really, and the trees get bare very quickly. And I've seen years where the foliage, because we have a stretch, a week or two of dry, kind of warmish weather, it gets really, really colorful, and all you see is like the brightest crimsons and the gold colors and stuff like that. Sometimes we have a lot of rusty red. It depends. Year to year, it does definitely look different. So it's sort of, you never know what you're going to get as far as the leaf peeping goes. But hopefully it'll be a good year. It'd be nice to have some nice crisp colors, and then people can paint it. They can come up and they can get wasted out in the mountains and say, oh, we're roughing it because we have a propane generator and, a 10-room cabin or something like that. And it's all very wonderful. And then these people, they come down into Rutland often and they go shopping. Or Burlington, which would be, generally you'd have more shopping opportunities. But it is good. It's one of the better things about this state is that time of year it gets nice and crisp. It's not hot, but it's also not frigid, and so, you just throw on a flannel, you can do your outdoor work preparing, really, for the next year's garden or whatever. If you're into that sort of stuff. Otherwise, maybe long hikes, things like that. It's nice and crisp and dry. And it's wonderful. So yeah, come and go leaf peeping, and then, of course, a few months later, people come to go skiing. Because the mountains, doesn't matter how mild the winter is, the mountains will be snowy. It's difficult for them not to be. They get worried if there's less than a couple of feet up there, and so they actually prime up the snow machines, and you don't even realize it, but some of that snow is actually artificial, and it's been blasted out onto the ski slopes by machines. Some people appear unaware of this fact. It's a novel idea, I suppose. That's about all. Peace out.